Good morning, everyone. The title of my talk today is Well-Being. And I think this topic of well-being is foundational to all religious or spiritual paths. And I have to say, I didn't come by the title too easily for some reason. You know, sometimes those pop up and you can use it and it sounds right, and other times it's a bit of a struggle, but I was reminded of something that Pema Chodron has said. You know, she's often asked to, she's doing talks a lot, obviously, throughout the year, and workshops and whatnot, and she's usually asked well ahead of time, you know, like a year and a half ahead of time, what's the title of your talk for, you know, October of 2025? And she chuckles about it, and she says, you know, I don't know what I'm going to be talking about this far in advance. And she tells the story of her teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, who told her one time, he said, essentially, for me, you know, it's a different title each time, but it's always the same talk. And I think in a certain way, well-being is something we're always talking about. It's in every talk. And I'd also flip it around and say that for today's talk, and the title well-being, you know, it's just related to everything we ever practice and the Buddha taught us. And if we have a starting point of what Buddha understood about enlightenment, his talks are always related to well-being and relieving suffering and delusions and so on. You know, many Buddhist temples and centers around the world offer regular well-being ceremonies. We have done some of those in the past also. And these are times when Sanghas chant for the well-being of loved ones and for all who suffer from maybe physical or psychological stress and distress. And it's a ceremony actually that's been handed down by our ancestors, and more specifically to us by the founder of San Francisco Zen Center, Suzuki Roshi. So after bowing and offering fragrance, as one might normally do, included in this ceremony is what's called in Japanese the Enmei Juku Kanon Gyo, which is in English the 10-verse Compassion Sutra for protecting life. And it's an invocation to Kanzeon, Japanese name for Chinese goddess Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. And she is said to have, you know, originated in India from the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, who was traditionally considered male, but it was another Bodhisattva that we intone here on Sundays. And some of you might be familiar with with this chant. It starts out Kanze Anamu Butsu Yo Butsu U In, and then it gets faster and faster and faster. And it's chanted 10 times, as its name suggests. You know, it starts out at a regular pace, and it speeds up very quickly. So I think in reality, we are never separated from offering, both in and out of the Zendo, offering or receiving the wish for well-being. It's in our teachings, it's in our meditation practice, it's in our chants, it's in our rituals, it's in our greetings, it's in life. There's a reason I came by this title, of course, and this past week, I attended a full-day course entitled Mental Health First Aid, which was offered to all employees and volunteers at J.C. Fremont Health District in Mariposa, which is where I'm a hospice volunteer. And the workshop itself was offered by the Mariposa County Health and Human Resources or Services Agency. And it just sounded interesting to me. And it is certainly training that I felt I could use, and not only as a hospital volunteer, but just in life. So I signed up, and it was actually a really good day. And it was focused on, I'm not going to go, obviously, talk about the entire workshop today, but you'll see why I'm talking about it. But it was focused on 3 important aspects, which you can imagine, which is how to recognize signs and symptoms of mental health challenges, and how to listen non-judgmentally and give it assurance and reassurance to someone who might be experiencing such a challenge. And then resources that we might refer people to professional resources and support. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the materials they gave us, from the presenters, and certainly from the other participants, who are most all, they were most all in the medical field or in health and human services, actually, except for me specifically. But I just want to share my experiences as a participant, who was also a Zen practitioner of many decades. And I wanted to try to express today the extent to which our practice permeates all aspects of our lives, really, including participating in a mental health first aid course. We can say that studying and practicing and becoming Buddha's way is always a matter of one's mind, one's well-being, physically, mentally, and the well-being of ours and that of others, and also a being of service to others. So I think you understand how I might have connected these 2 things together. Fundamentally, and obvious to us here, I think, is that to learn and absorb anything on that day, this last week, I had to show up, which I did, and then I just had to be as fully present as I could be. And I knew that it required a very open, non-judgmental mind in order to really see and hear and feel what was going on around me and what was being presented to me. So at the same time, of course, I do not have a blank slate when it comes to mental health. But I noticed that there was no tendency to predict what was coming, predict the information that was going to be shared with me. No need to peek and go through the handbook beforehand, or make assumptions about content. And I mention that because it's so vastly different, to be honest with you, how I was so many decades ago, sitting in a workshop or a class when I was teaching at Fresno City College or at Fresno State, my teaching career. And, I was usually in those modes. I usually was thinking, okay, I know a lot about this, what am I going to learn? Or just being in my own world about it and not being fully open to just letting arise what arises when it arises. And, knowing things ahead of time obviously is not a bad thing. I'm not trying to say that. And we always, even subconsciously, tap into what we already know about a topic. Our brains do this for us. They bring information forward. But if we're focused on us and what we already know, we close off to information being presented to us. And that information may be being presented in new and exciting ways that are not familiar to us. We might be thinking ahead of what's coming and predicting. And sometimes telling ourselves, oh, I know that, so I can just check out. But in other words, taking ourselves completely out of the present moment, the present learning experience. However, we know in Zen, we practice this all the time. Staying with a thought or a feeling when sitting on our cushion, for example. or staying in the power of the present moment, so that we can just have an open mind and heart to whatever happens to arise. And there are times when we don't do that. You know, how often are we speaking to someone about whom we have our preconceptions about who they are, what they've done, what we think we know to be true or not true, even if that information is from decades ago. So what I noticed on this day is this natural tendency to simply be there, to simply stay in the moment with everyone, not expecting anything, and to do that for 8 hours. And this is our practice in practice. There it is. So, you know, this course, Mental Health First Aid, describes an action plan for those of us who, you know, should we encounter mental health challenges in other people, or maybe ourselves too. And they use this acronym called ALGEE, A-L-G-E-E, by the way. And the A refers to, you know, approach, assess, and assist or support others. So it's looking at that and how we can do that. But the L stands for something we all practice, which is listening non-judgmentally. There's quite a bit of time spent on this throughout the course, of what it means to listen non-judgmentally, how that looks, how that might feel if you're not doing that, you know, when it's helpful in what you're doing and when it's not helpful. And you know, it was a theme throughout the class all day long. The G goes on, it's giving reassurance and information, and the 2 E's are encouraging appropriate help, professional help, and encouraging self-help and other support strategies. So the topics themselves are familiar to us, and some of them very, very much so, and specifically so. They are a part of our everyday practice. They are part of living our lives, taking a breath in and out. But when we consider just one of these, listening non-judgmentally through a Zen lens, we understand that it includes not just giving time and space to our preconceptions, judgments, and biases. You know, this is the concept of not knowing. We try not to bring all of that in. Whether it's related to learning in a classroom full of people or doing a deep inquiry into our own tendencies. Listening deeply, without judging, with our whole hearts, minds, and bodies, is at the very center of our practice. And how we take our practice out into the world, like I did last Wednesday. So whether it's me sitting at a table role-playing, which we did a few times in this course on mental health, or sitting on a cushion, struggling with one of my own delusions or thoughts or feelings, this very Buddhist concept of listening non-judgmentally is fundamental to living our lives and to our well-being and the well-being of others. And it was fundamental to my learning last Wednesday. And what I'm trying to say, I think, is that I noticed so clearly how my practice has enhanced my ability to show up with a non-judgmental mind, open to what arises. And you know, Buddhism, of course, has a focus on recognizing suffering, recognizing dis-ease in ourselves and others, and understanding this as a shared experience of all sentient beings. And this is what we become on this path, this realization, this actualization of this intrinsic understanding of our non-separation from all beings and all things. And in this regard, I had a really interesting experience that day. A part of this training about ALGEE, this acronym, so part of one of the chapters is on suicide, actually, with a focus on recognizing suicidal thoughts and behaviors and assessing suicidal risk. Now, I'm not planning on talking to you about suicide, but I mention it here because something very interesting and profound happened while we were learning about this topic. We were asked to choose a partner, and the directions were that we would look directly at our partner and we would ask them one question. And after we asked the question, we did not respond. So I would ask a question, my partner would not respond to that question. My partner would ask me that question, I would not respond to that question. So the first question was, looking deeply at each other, have you had thoughts of suicide? And then we were asked to include another question. Again, looking at each other and not responding to each other. So it went like this. Have you had thoughts of suicide? Have you thought about how or when you might do this? This was a really interesting exercise on many levels. Afterwards, the presenters asked people how they felt, because what they were expecting is that it's a normal reaction. This is not comfortable. This is not comfortable for us to ask. Maybe we don't even know how to approach this topic. We're afraid of it. And many of the people who raised their hand, participants, said that they were very uncomfortable. They were very uneasy about asking it, and they had difficulty keeping eye contact. They were nervous. But really interesting in my own, and was my opinion also. I raised my hand, and my response was, it felt like a vital, emotional, human connection to my partner. That was my response. And when I was doing this with my partner, it was emotional for both of us. And it wasn't, to me, just about suicide. It was about the ability that we're cultivating here in our practice to see each other, to feel each other's pain as not different from our own. And after I said my last sentence, have you thought about how and when you might do this? My partner, as we continued to look at each other, said, that was really good. And she didn't have to do that, obviously, but she was emotional, I was emotional. So to me, that was a really good connection. And as we know, when the Buddha experienced enlightenment, he realized that this interconnectedness is, in fact, the true nature of all beings, to all things and each other. So this day-long course for me, was filled with learning about mental health, of course, and I'm really, really happy that I went. I learned a lot, met some people, but what shone through for me throughout the day were the impacts of this beautiful practice of ours that teaches us to connect to our inner selves and to others, and that it emphasizes our full potential to awaken. And I hope you will notice that in yourselves as you step off the cushions and go out into the world. This beautiful capacity that we have